Donald Trump has just announced his vice presidential pick. I did have a poll in the chat right here as we were waiting. The majority of people who responded, the large majority of people who responded said JD Vance. It was, in fact, JD Vance. Donald Trump just posted on Truth Social the following post. He said, quote, "After lengthy deliberation and thought, and considering the tremendous talents of many others, I have decided that the person best suited to assume the position of Vice President of the United States is Senator JD Vance of the great state of Ohio. JD honorably served our country in the Marine Corps, graduated from Ohio State University in 2 years, summa cum laude, and is a Yale Law School graduate, where he was editor of the Yale Law Journal and president of the Yale Law Veterans Association. JD's book, Hillbilly Elegy, became a bestseller and movie, as it has championed the hardworking men and women of our country. JD has had a very successful business career in technology and finance, and now, during the campaign, he will strongly be focused on the people he fought so brilliantly for, the American workers and farmers in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Minnesota, and far beyond." So that's it. The decision has been announced. He has chosen JD Vance of Ohio. I do want to talk about the implications of this choice because I think that the choice is pretty telling here for a couple of reasons. The first is that Donald Trump's decision to choose JD Vance is indicative of his confidence as he moves closer and closer to November. The way that Trump's brain works is if he felt like he needed to give a permission structure to certain voters, let's say African-American voters or Latino voters, for example, he would find someone who he believes could be kind of a bridge to that community, in the same way that he needed evangelicals in 2016, and so he chose Mike Pence because obviously Mike Pence had, a direct line to the evangelical community. In this scenario, if he felt like he needed some type of person who could give a permission structure to minority voters, for example, I believe he would have picked Marco Rubio because, again, in Donald Trump's brain, he says, oh, look, we have somebody who has a background, a Latino background, for example. Picking that person will just blindly be a permission structure for voters out there to say, oh, Latino person, I'm a Latino person. That's all it takes. That's the way the Trump's brain works. I don't necessarily buy it, but in any case, for him to have chosen someone like Marco Rubio would have given us this idea that Donald Trump felt a little worried, and so he needs to bring in more people, and so that's why he chose a specific person. The fact that he didn't shows that he's confident in his chances as we head toward November, because JD Vance doesn't bring anything else to the conversation that Donald Trump doesn't already bring. He is a through and through MAGA acolyte. He's not establishment. He doesn't calm the nerves of the rhinos out there who might have been more receptive to someone like Doug Burgum. He is just mini Trump. And so it shows that the fact that Donald Trump didn't need to choose somebody else like Marco Rubio or Doug Burgum shows that he's not worried about bringing other people into his coalition or his tent. He feels confident in his chances as he heads towards November that he can just have somebody who's basically a mini him and just juice turnout among his core base. So that's the message that I get from this. There's also one more message that I would get in all of this, and I would say aside from just the immediate electoral implications of choosing someone like JD Vance, he's also basically anointing JD Vance the heir to the MAGA movement moving forward. He recognizes that JD Vance, to his credit, can very rightfully has his finger on the pulse of what the Republican base wants. And so he's saying, look, it's not just going to end with me. It's not just going to end with Trump. We have somebody here who can pick up the mantle of Trumpism moving forward. JD Vance doesn't believe it, I should mention, because there is a long history of Vance basically giving his true thoughts on who Donald Trump is. There was a couple of years back where JD Vance, I'm going to read you a message that JD Vance wrote a few years back about Donald Trump. I'm not surprised by Trump's rise, but I think the entire party has only itself to blame. We are, whether we like it or not, the party of lower income, lower education white people, and I have been saying for a long time that we need something to offer those people something, and hell, maybe even expand our appeal to working class black people in the process, or a demagogue would. We are now at that point. Trump is the fruit of the party's collective neglect. I go back and forth between thinking Trump is a cynical asshole like Nixon, who wouldn't be that bad and might even prove useful, or that he's America's Hitler. How's that for discouraging? That is a message written by JD Vance, all of which is to say, the guy knows what he's doing. He knows who Donald Trump is. What he's doing right now is an act. He is putting on an act because he knows that it's going to enable himself to rise to power, and that's what he's done. These thoughts that I just read out loud are JD Vance's true opinions of Donald Trump, but he is putting on an act to fool the rubes who make up the Republican base. And he knows how to do it. I mean, he has his finger on the pulse of what working class Republican base voters want. That's why Trump chose him. And that is why Trump is effectively making him the heir to the Republican Party moving forward, the heir to the MAGA movement moving forward, because he knows that he has his finger on that pulse. He knows that if he chose, for example, Marco Rubio, that Marco Rubio's true allegiances, Marco Rubio's had every position under the sun. He's flip-flopped more than any other person in politics possibly could. And so he knows that the minute Donald Trump was gone, Marco Rubio would just do whatever he needs to do to revert back to whatever positions he holds, because Marco Rubio doesn't have any allegiance to Trumpism. Same with Doug Burgum. These people do not espouse Trumpism, or at least they don't promise to in the future. But JD Vance knows how to manipulate the Republican base, and he knows what works on them. And what works on them is Trumpism. And so even though he doesn't believe it, he'll still continue to espouse it, because it's not about perpetuating some honest ideology. It is about manipulating them with an ideology that works. And that's demagoguery. And you know that it works because JD Vance himself warned about it in his honest thoughts before Trump became the president, before Trump chose him as a vice presidential nominee. So that's where we're at right now. I do think the worrisome part of this is the fact that, Trump didn't feel like he needed to find someone who would help facilitate outreach to a different community, because he feels just that confident in his chances to become president that he doesn't need to choose Doug Burgum as a bridge to reach out to those Rhino, Wall Street Journal reading Republicans. He didn't need to choose Marco Rubio as a permission structure for Latino voters or people of color to come into his coalition. He just went with somebody who was already full MAGA, and so that's a kind of betrays just how confident he feels as he heads toward November. And it does look. There is a silver lining for us, and that is that JD Vance just further perpetuates the exact ideology that Donald Trump himself perpetuates. It would be tougher to run against someone like Nikki Haley, for example, or Marco Rubio, for example, because again, I do feel like it would give a permission structure to maybe those squishy Republican voters out there who are on the fence or who've left Trump's camp to say, okay, Trump may be, a deranged lunatic, who's just completely off the rails, but at least there's some moderating force on him. Would there be? Not in a million years, but people lie to themselves to give themselves permission to do things that they don't necessarily want to do. But they could look at Doug Burgum and say, look, even if something happens to Trump, the next guy in line is more normal, more palatable for me. The fact that he didn't kind of gives the left an opening to say what you're signing up for in a second Trump term is just full, unadulterated, unapologetic, unequivocal Trumpism. And that's what you're going to get from Donald Trump, and it's going to be further entrenched, further bolstered, redoubled by someone like JD Vance. So he is not a good choice for Republicans on that front, and that does leave an opening for Democrats to say, look, the Biden-Harris ticket is a ticket that will that is unified in protecting women's reproductive rights, that's unified in protecting union workers, that's unified in protecting democracy, that's unified in protecting kids in schools and passing common sense gun safety reforms and bringing expanding the economy from the bottom out and the middle out, But then they can look at someone like JD Vance and Donald Trump, who are completely aligned on their agenda, and say there is no daylight between the two. Both of them stand for the exact same thing, which is basically two people who will promise to enact Project 2025, who are looking for the consolidation, the full consolidation of the executive branch, which is now bolstered by the Supreme Court decision, and on and on. I mean, these are people who are very aligned when it comes to deporting 15 to 20 million immigrants, for example, very aligned in kind of erasing LGBTQ ideology from American society, who are aligned on issue after issue after issue. And so these are the issues that the vast majority of Americans don't support. What remains to be seen, though, and what is going to be difficult for Democrats moving forward is, of course, this immediate question of what happens with Joe Biden on the ticket. And look, I have been... There was a poll that was especially worrisome this morning, and I do want to bring it up. And I'm bringing it up not because it necessarily, not because with regard to what to do about Joe Biden, which is not to say anything about where I stand on this issue, but I think it's worth bringing it up just because it's important to have a full breadth of knowledge of what's happening right now. And we don't benefit ourselves by burying our heads in the sand. So I do want to read one poll in particular that was concerning, and that is, there is a poll this morning from YouGov that discussed both Democratic senators in swing states against their Republican opponents and Trump versus Biden in those same states. And it was largely an extraordinarily strong poll for the Democratic Senate candidates. In Arizona, Ruben Gallego is up 8 points. In Michigan, Elise Slotkin is up 9 points. In Nevada, Jackie Rosen's up 7 points. In Pennsylvania, Bob Casey is up 12 points. In Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin is up 7 points. A phenomenal poll for Democrats. The problem comes that in that same poll, Donald Trump is up 7 points in Arizona. Donald Trump is up 4 points in Georgia. Donald Trump is up 2 points in Michigan. Trump is up 4 points in North Carolina. Trump is up 4 points in Nevada, 3 points in Pennsylvania, and 5 points in Wisconsin. So the problem is that the same people who are saying that they are going to go and vote for the Democratic candidates in Arizona and Michigan and Nevada and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, a tenth of them are also coming forward and saying, I'm going to choose Trump instead of Biden. So it's easy to look at a poll where it's just presidential nominees, for example, and it shows Trump up 2, 3, 4 points, whatever it is, and to say, well, who knows? A poll's a poll. Who knows what we can actually trust these days? But this is a poll where we have the same exact respondents who are saying we're going to vote for Ruben Gallego by an 8-point margin, a staggering 8-point margin. Bob Casey in Pennsylvania by a staggering 12-point margin, who are then saying we're also going to vote for Donald Trump by in the case of Pennsylvania, Casey's up 12, Trump is up 3. That is a 15-point swing. That means 15% of Bob Casey Democratic voters are saying we're not going to vote for Joe Biden, we're going to vote for Donald Trump. So it's certainly a worrisome poll, because these are the direct respondents that show the difference in terms of people's choices for Senate candidates, and these are people who are receptive to voting for Democrats who are expressly not going to vote for Joe Biden. So it is something worrying moving forward, and I think that played into, in large part, the reason that Donald Trump feels so confident that he could choose someone like JD Vance, who doesn't need, again, to give some permission structure to some other faction of voters out there. He's just like, screw it. We're so comfortable in our lead right now that we can just double down on MAGA, on America First, on Trumpism. And so that's a worrying sign moving forward. Again, look, I'm in the same boat as all of you. I've said from the beginning, anybody who watches my videos knows that there is no bigger champion for the agenda that Joe Biden has passed than me. And if you've watched my videos, again, I feel proud that most of us at this point can recite the list of accomplishments that Joe Biden is responsible for, from the American Rescue Plan to the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, the PACT Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Gun Safety Law, reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, 16 million jobs, sub 4% inflation, sub 4% unemployment for the longest stretch in half a century, inflation going down, wages now exceeding inflation. So the list is extraordinary, and I've repeated it almost on a daily basis for the last couple of years now. So there is no, bigger champion for the agenda that Biden has passed than me. But like I think a lot of you, I want to do and need to do whatever is best for our prospects of beating Donald Trump. I don't know what that is. It's going to be up to people who are not me to make that decision. If it ends up being Biden in the end, then I will continue to hammer away, at the messaging that no one has done more for the American people, for the climate, for low-income workers, for unions than Joe Biden himself. And if it's someone else, then I will continue to beat the same exact drum, because it is not one person who's responsible for all of this stuff. It's the Democratic Party writ large. This is whoever it is, whether it's Biden, whether it's Kamala, whether it's somebody else, I don't know, but I know that I will be here making sure that we are advocating for our agenda, because the flip side of this, the Trumps and JD Vances of it all, will perpetuate an agenda that is just beyond dangerous, and that would effectively signal the end of American democracy as we know it. That is what Project 2025 is. It is overturning any precedent they don't like. There were people who were associated with Project 2025 who came out and said in public that their goal was to eliminate the progress of the 20th century. Think about the implications of such a move. That would mean, think about the implications in terms of civil rights and the Civil Rights Act, in terms of women's rights, in terms of reproductive rights, in terms of LGBT rights, same-sex marriage, interracial marriage, contraception, abortion, IVF, interstate travel. All of it is on the line if Trump and JD Vance are able to succeed. They have already shown us what their agenda is. So, look, I'll be here hammering away at what we're able, what Democrats will be able to do as we head forward, the kind of country that Democrats are promising to offer Americans as we head to the polls in November, and contrast that with what Republicans are looking to do as we head forward in this next election. But I felt like, in terms of speaking to you right now and doing this live stream, I do feel like it's important to make sure that we all have all of the information. I know that the majority of my audience does want Joe Biden to stay. And again, I have been the biggest advocate for Joe Biden that you could possibly find, and rightfully so, deservedly so. But I don't think that it's worth it for us to bury our heads in the sand when there is information that's out here. And so that's why I wanted to read that poll to you, so that you have a full breadth of knowledge of what the facts are and what the polling looks like, as whoever it's going to be that's going to ultimately make this decision, which is probably some combination of Joe Biden and his advisors and his family, as they make that decision. So I think it's important, not to purposefully disregard any pertinent info as we move forward, because that's not helping anybody to kind of bury our heads in the sand. So with that said, we do have the opportunity now, because we're doing this live stream. If you have any questions, throw them in the chat. I'll be happy to answer them, and we can kind of get a better sense of what you'd like to know as we just found out this decision about JD Vance becoming the choice for Donald Trump. As you write your questions in the chat, as I wait for those to pop up, first of all, please tag me in the chat so that I can see the questions. And second of all, if you're not yet subscribed to this channel and you enjoy these live streams, I'm going to be doing them more and more frequently. Please make sure to subscribe. It does not cost anything to do so. I don't believe in putting any of my content behind a paywall, but just subscribing is a great way to support my work. About half of you watching right now are not subscribed. So for those who are watching, if you just very quickly hit the subscribe button, again, a great way to support the work that I do. And I only post a couple of times a day, so there will not be a barrage of videos clogging up your feeds. Okay. Gary asked, you recently had a video that highlighted all of the reporting regarding right-wing reactions to political violence versus Democratic response. Can we get more of those to memorize and share? Yes, I think that's going to be especially important. Look, in response to the shooting, there have been Republicans, including JD Vance, who was the very first one to sprint over to this new talking point that the political assassination attempt was the result of Democratic rhetoric in terms of calling Donald Trump a fascist. So first of all, Donald Trump is a fascist. The agenda that he's promising is a fascist agenda. He wants to consolidate power for the executive branch. He wants to use the military to help him, enact that agenda. He wants to fire thousands of career civil servants and make them political appointees, as many as 50,000 career civil servants, make them political appointees, all of whom would be beholden to Trump. They would effectively be Trump loyalists. He wants to perpetuate criminal acts with complete immunity, which was already given the green light by the Supreme Court. He is a fascist. So I want to make sure that no Democrats feel like they're responsible for rhetoric that has been for an agenda that Donald Trump has already staunchly placed himself behind. And in fact, the reason that we're fighting so hard against Donald Trump is expressly so that we don't have politicians who are successful in validating violence as a political tool. So I will continue to beat the drum and do more of it. Every time, this talking point comes up by Republicans that somehow Democrats are the party of violence, I will continue to beat this drum and show that, it wasn't Democrats who are perpetuating this idea that violence is a viable tool to get some political outcome that you want, that it was not Democrats who, for example, laughed off the kidnapping scheme against Gretchen Whitmer. That was Trump and Republicans. It wasn't Democrats who laughed off Paul Pelosi being bludgeoned with a hammer. That was Trump and Republicans. It wasn't Democrats who, on issue after issue, it wasn't Democrats who perpetuated the events of January 6th. It wasn't Democrats who claimed that they would pay legal bills when their rally goers beat up protesters. All of that was Trump and Republicans. And I have example after example after example. So for as long as Republicans keep claiming that Democrats are the party of violence, I'll keep coming on and pushing back with not only my thoughts on the matter, but their own words and tweets and posts about this exact issue as well. Can I do more interviews with authors of political books? Currently reading Minority Rule by Ari Berman. I did interview Ari Berman, and he was excellent. And yes, as soon as other people have books, they do their whole book circuit, and I'll gladly have them on. I just had Jen on, who released her book, Jen Psaki on, who released her book, Say More, which was a great read. And of course, for those watching right now, if you're not aware, I do have my own book coming out in less than a month. It's called Shameless. It is pinned at the top of the comments section, or you can search on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, whatever it is, for Shameless by Brian Tyler Cohen. It's available for pre-order. That is the best way to support what I do. Again, I don't do memberships. I don't do paid ads. I don't do sponsorships or anything like that. I don't believe in putting my content behind a paywall. But if you do want to support the work that I'm doing, the best way to do that is to pre-order my book. For those who have and for those who are planning to, thank you so much. I very much appreciate it. Okay. Will I interview President Biden again? I do hope to. That would be the plan. Obviously everything remains to be seen because it's a little bit in flux right now in terms of what the hell is going to happen. So I guess we're all kind of just waiting to see some definitive answer. But the polls are still changing, and look, the whole dynamic seems relatively fluid right now. But I guess we'll have some clarity in the coming days and weeks, because we will have to choose a nominee at the DNC, about a month from now. Be honest, what do I think our chances are if we keep Biden as our nominee? I am worried. I think it's okay to be worried. I don't know that there's anybody in Democratic politics who isn't worried. In terms of the chances, look, my guess is as good as anybody else's. I can't predict the future, and anybody who claims that they could is lying to you. All I can do, in terms of being an honest broker of this stuff, all I can do is look at the information in front of me. We have worrisome polls for sure. The poll that I just read from, which is, shows a bunch of Democratic Senate candidates up 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 points, and Biden down in all of those races, which again shows that there are very clearly voters out there who are willing to vote for Democrats, but who aren't willing to vote for Joe Biden. So that's worrisome for me. At the same time, I recognize that, Joe Biden's been counted out before. He was counted out in 2020 and not only became the nominee, but also defeated Donald Trump by, 7 million votes, 74 million to 81 million. This is kind of the story of his career. But I also don't, we can go back and forth all day. I don't want to be naive in thinking that just because it happened in 2020 means it could happen again. But then again, we have the incumbency advantage for the president. And only about 9 or 10 times in American history has the incumbent lost. But with that said, the incumbent did just lose in 2020. So we can go back and forth all day. I don't know the answer to this. Of course I'm worried. Of course I look at the polls and I get concerned. Ultimately, I think from a messaging perspective, the way that I've been handling this is to focus on the agenda that any Democrat, whether it's Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, or someone else, is going to put forward, and that this election is not so much, if it does end up being Joe Biden, the message is this: this election is not about punishing or rewarding Joe Biden. Joe Biden is 81 years old. He will not be around forever. This is about what kind of a country we want to live in moving forward. This is about what kind of a country, who you want in the Oval Office from 2025 to 2029, who will be in charge of appointing the next Supreme Court justices when Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito inevitably step down because they're 75 and 74 years old, and possibly Sonia Sotomayor, who is, I believe, in her early 70s, and John Roberts, who I believe is 69 or 70, and the next president can very well have the opportunity to name as many as 4 Supreme Court justices. And think about the implications on that, or of that, for abortion rights, for contraception, for IVF, for same-sex marriage, for interracial marriage, for gerrymandering, for fair maps, for presidential immunity, for Roe, Dobbs, democracy itself. That's what we're voting on in this next election. It's not to punish or reward Joe Biden. That would make the election about Joe Biden. It's not about Joe Biden. It's about us. It's about what country we want moving forward. It's about what kind of a country we want for our kids. It's about whether we're going to take climate change seriously. It's about whether we're going to take reproductive rights seriously, about gun rights, gun safety seriously. On issue after issue, that's what's at stake in this election. If you think we're going in there to reward Joe Biden, that hands him all the power. Who's in office? Joe Biden is our boss. It's about what agenda we want moving forward. And so I think for people who are looking for a way to explain this to folks, their friends, their family who may have soured on Joe Biden, remind them this isn't about Joe Biden. This is about us. Who do you want in the Oval Office passing laws that are going to impact us? Joe Biden and Donald Trump are going to be fine. They are wealthy old white men. They're going to be okay regardless of what happens. It's us, the rest of us, who have to suffer the consequences. It's black women who are disproportionately impacted by this stuff, who are going to have to suffer the consequences. That's what this election's about. So that's the messaging that we focus on, regardless who's at the top of the ticket. What's going to make an impact is who can prosecute that case better. And look, Joe Biden does have trouble doing that. With that said, we can go right back to the argument I was making before that on one hand, he's the incumbent and there's a massive advantage. On another hand, there's polling that shows him weaker than other Democrats, and we don't want him to drag down the ticket. So, these are all going to be taken into account as we head forward toward the DNC, which is going to happen, I believe, August 18th or 19th. I believe it starts on the 19th. But I think our messaging stays the same, but it will be interesting. And I don't think that we hurt ourselves by again, taking an honest look at all of this. And I say that as someone who has advocated relentlessly, breathlessly for what President Biden has done and will continue to do so if he's the nominee. But my focus is not on the person, is on the agenda. And I've always said this, the Democratic Party is not a cult. I don't pray to Joe Biden. I don't pray. I'm not looking to marry Joe Biden. He's not my partner or my God. He is any Democratic official is a vehicle to get me and us closer to the future that we want for this country and to enact the agenda that we're looking to have enacted. So, I think that's the important part moving forward. But again, it's going to be up to a lot of people out here who have Joe Biden's ear to determine what the best course of action is, and hopefully to do that with a full breadth of the knowledge of what the political scene in this country looks like right now. How's that for a short answer? Do I think Biden could benefit from switching the ticket so that Harris is at the top of the ticket and Biden takes the VP slot? I perfectly honestly, in the, and I say unlikely just because this would be very unprecedented. If it did become Kamala Harris, no, I think that it would be because Joe Biden stepped aside. And so I don't think they would swap seats on the ticket, because I do think in that catastrophic event, and I don't say catastrophic meaning good or bad, I just mean unprecedented, historic, in the catastrophic event that did happen, that Joe Biden did step aside in deference to Kamala Harris, she would use that opportunity to name a VP who is, young, charismatic, whatever it is. Okay, let's see. Next questions. any idea in light of what has happened on what the agenda to move forward should be? And I think that Susan's question is in response to the shooting at Trump's Pennsylvania rally. I think our message stays exactly the same. Because there was an assassination attempt against Donald Trump does not undermine the fact that Donald Trump is still perpetuating an agenda that, by the way, would validate that exact brand of political violence. So, if anything, that should just redouble our efforts to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't get anywhere near the Oval Office again. Remember, by the way, just on the issue of guns, it was Trump and Republicans who made sure that we haven't been able to pass an assault weapons ban in this country, even though that would have prevented that exact kind of weapon from being in the hands of a civilian. It was Donald Trump who has rolled back an Obama-era rule that prevented the mentally ill from getting their hands on a gun. Like, how do you wrap your head around that? This is a guy who wanted the mentally ill to be able to purchase a weapon, to get his hands on a weapon. And so he rolled back a very common sense Obama-era rule that likely had the support of more than 90% of Americans. And then a mentally ill person tried to assassinate him. And so this is the exact reason that Donald Trump himself is a walking, talking example, a test case as to why we shouldn't have these kind of laws in place. And yet, if he takes power, these are the exact laws that he'll attempt to perpetuate, that he'll attempt to pass, and he'll have the support of his full party. Do I expect more assassination attempts on either side? And if yes, what would happen if one is successful? Sadly, I think we would be naive to say that in light of one assassination attempt, that there wouldn't be more. It's going to be up to the the Secret Service to make sure that doesn't happen. It's going to be up to everybody to kind of be on higher guard. It makes like my life more difficult too. Working in politics has major like safety implications, even for people like me. I don't want to go into too much detail, but like just from emails I've gotten and from steps I've had to take to protect myself, that's, I'm sure, just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what a lot of people who have much higher profiles in politics have had to deal with. So I'm sure that in an era where the insatiable appetite for retribution burns so hotly on the right, that there won't be people who saw what happened in Pennsylvania and will try to reciprocate. I obviously hope that that's not the case, because I think that would just lead to a complete breakdown of the political environment in this country. And it's not like why people like me got into this so that we could worry about our safety and our lives. I think we just got into this because, we saw that there was a better way to kind of make sure that people were able to live with dignity. Whether it's with economic policies or civil rights or LGBT rights or making schools safer for kids or making sure that people had much wider access and affordability for healthcare, whatever it is not so that we can, cower in fear when we're out in public. And I think too that one of the side effects of this is that you have normal people who could be effective legislators, who could really be successful in politics and who have good ideas and are there for the right reasons, who will be dissuaded from entering this arena because look at all the violence that's happening right now. Who would want to sign up for this? And so I'm sure that there are good people out there who would be, the next JFK or Obama or FDR or whatever it is, that are going to look at this and say, like, fuck that. Why would I voluntarily sign myself up for this? Why would I want to, basically be steeped in the toxicity that is politics today and the danger that is politics today? And so I actually think that is one of the tactics that the right purposefully wields, knowing that it will push good people away. And that's just kind of a sad byproduct of this entire thing, that when we see generational figures like Barack Obama, for example, like a lot of the people who are in the party today. Look, Bernie Sanders has done an enormous amount of work in terms of bringing progressives into the party. And there are so many people in our politics, but I'm worried that the next tranche of those people, the next class of those people, could be whittled down just by virtue of the fact that now, because we're in a different era of politics, that it won't be as attractive, and that the incentives will be far outweighed by the danger of even entering this whole process. And that's not only sad, but it redounds to the political benefit of the bad actors out there who rely on making people feel scared, who, those demagogues out there who are just like dirtying up the whole process for everybody, and kind of entrenching their own ability to be successful in the political process without having good figures on the right to beat them. Good figures on the left to beat them. So that's my thoughts on the political violence that we're facing right now. And then the next question I got was, what is my home state? I feel very hesitant to start answering personal information after giving a whole diatribe about the dangers of political assassinations. The next question was, what's your home state? It's like, hello, Brian, what street do you live on? I live in California. That is my home state. While I'm answering the next questions, again, for those watching, two great ways to support this channel and these live streams are, one, to subscribe if you're not yet subscribed. About half of those watching right now aren't subscribed. So if you can hit the subscribe button, it doesn't cost you anything, and you'll get updates at moments like this when I do live streams. And the other is, if you haven't yet pre-ordered my book, Shameless, that is a great way to support what I do. It's the only time I'll ask somebody to buy something that would support me, but I'm really proud of the book. It has a foreword that's written by Jamie Raskin. It also features interviews by Pete Buttigieg, Jen Psaki, Jamie Raskin, Mark Elias, Al Franken, Heather Cox Richardson. I'm very proud of the way it turned out. So if you haven't yet pre-ordered Shameless, you can click the link in the pinned comments up there in the comments section, or you can just search Shameless on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, bookshop.org. They benefit independent booksellers, bookshop.org, or wherever you get your books. Okay, that's the end of the shameless plugs for Shameless. Some think Biden as president, Obama VP as a ticket. Do you agree this might happen? No. I don't think Obama-Biden would be a viable ticket. I think, if anything, if Biden were at any point to step down, that we would likely just see Kamala Harris and somebody who she names as a vice president. But again, the likelihood of such an act is low, just by virtue of the fact that it would be unprecedented and it would just be a catastrophic move. Okay. If Trump wins, I think we're in for a rough 4 years. Can his damage be undone if he enacts Schedule F and Project 2025 for the administration after, or is this damage permanent? Basically, what Trump wants to do with Schedule F is turn... Right now, there are about 4,000 political appointees in the federal government. When a new presidential administration takes power, they have the opportunity to dismiss those 4,000 political appointees and bring in their own political appointees who more closely comport with their agenda. What Trump wanted to do with Schedule F was to reclassify 50,000 career civil servants as political appointees so that he could easily dismiss all of them and replace them with loyalists, with political acolytes. He wasn't able to do that. Biden, when he took office in 2020, passed a rule, I should say, that would prevent any further administrations from reclassifying career civil servants as political appointees. What we also know is that a rule is only as strong as the government's willingness to actually enforce it. So if Trump takes office again, he will absolutely revisit this rule. Anybody who stands up to him will probably have already been appointed by him. So he would pretty much have carte blanche to be able to pass Schedule F and make sure that he could reclassify as many as 50,000 career civil servants as political appointees, dismiss them, and fill the government with 50,000 loyalists who will then offer no impediment, no friction whatsoever in terms of enacting his agenda, as illegal, as unconstitutional, as immoral, as dangerous as it may be. So in terms of whether a future president after Trump would be able to change it, ignores the question of what kind of an effect such a move would have before the next presidential election rolls around. If you have people, for example, in the DOJ who start prosecuting cases that were brought by Republicans that suggest voter fraud, and they all go in Trump's favor, and they start throwing out results in Milwaukee or Detroit or Philadelphia, then the damage could already be permanent, because we would be looking at a situation where Republicans couldn't lose by virtue of the amount of people that they've put into positions where they could validate a lot of the attacks that Republicans are waging against the government. I mean, you and I both know that if 50,000 career civil servants were replaced by Trump appointees in 2020, when all of these lawsuits were coming forward, many of which were even shut down by Trump's own DOJ, by Bill Barr, by Ty Cobb, by White House counsel, if there's no more friction, then Trump could validate a lot of these completely baseless concerns and basically get his way with anything. We're getting a preview of that right now with the Supreme Court in terms of them basically, you know, if it feels like everything is falling in Donald Trump's favor, breaking in Trump's favor lately, it's because it is, and it's owed to the fact that the people who are breaking things in Trump's favor are his appointees or people who are closely aligned with his agenda. Judge Cannon was appointed by Trump. She's a MAGA acolyte. Look at the impact that that's having. Clarence Thomas, another MAGA acolyte. Samuel Alito, a MAGA acolyte. Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Barrett, all appointed by Donald Trump. So if you have any doubt about the impact that Trump appointees or Trump apologists or Trump mouthpieces or Trump acolytes can have, we're witnessing a preview of that right now. And it's on a small scale relative to what it will be if he is able to knock out. I mean, we're talking about 4 or 5 judges here. What if he's able to replace 50,000 people in the federal government? So, you know, when we talk about the dangers of Project 2025, we are getting a preview of that right now, but it will be on a scale that I don't think we're able to comprehend right now, which is why it's so important to not worry about undoing changes that Trump is able to do if he wins, but rather ensuring that he doesn't win so that we're not in that position in the first place. Would I move to another country if Trump wins and follows through with Project 2025? I did a video with Mark Elias about the danger that someone like me and someone like him, Mark Elias is the top voting rights attorney in the country, that we would face if Trump himself was if Trump himself was elected in November. I'll refer to that video. If you just go on my YouTube channel and you go to the Democracy Watch playlist, it's the first video there, or the second video, I believe. I think it's the first video, yeah. And it says, like, liberal YouTubers at risk under Trump presidency. So just go to my channel, and I'll refer to that because I think that's a good analysis of danger that people like me or people like Mark or Democrats more broadly would face. But my immediate reaction would be no. But who knows what things could look like. All right. I know there isn't a lot of fun in politics these days, but can you imagine a Vance versus Kamala debate? I would actually look forward to that. And the reason is that, you know, I know that people have tried to redefine Kamala Harris, but she has been prosecuting. First of all, she is a prosecutor, and she's running against a ticket that includes a convicted felon. Her ability to prosecute a convicted felon is not in doubt here. She's also been going across the country prosecuting the case of Dobbs in college campuses, in major metropolitan areas, wherever she is. That's her issue, and so that is the issue that has ignited the Democratic Party unlike any other issue in modern American history. So I think she'll be especially effective. Maybe not. There a lot of the criticism she faces is when she's doing speeches or whatever. But when she's, you have to remember her background as a prosecutor. When she is facing somebody one-on-one, she is insanely effective. And in fact, the most viewed video on my entire YouTube channel is Kamala Harris going back and forth with somebody at the Senate Judiciary Committee during some hearing back when she was in the Senate. So she is immensely effective when she is just prosecuting a case against somebody one-on-one. Okay, I will do one more question here, and then we can wrap it up. Okay, this is an interesting question. And I've gotten iterations of this question before, and we'll end with this. If Biden steps down and passes the torch to Harris, what do you think about a Harris-Cheney lineup? I think it's interesting that in an ideal scenario for Democrats, that we defer in large part to unity with Republicans, and in an ideal scenario for Republicans, they are just far-right extremists who want the Democrats just to be completely torched beyond repair. And I think that's the asymmetry at play. So what I would caution against for Democrats is to not immediately seek to defer to Republicans, that we have the better agenda. We have the more popular agenda. We have the vast majority of our country behind us. We don't need to seek some permission structure by Republicans. I think if we just run on our agenda the way that we have in 2018, 2020, 2022, 2023, then we will win. That we don't, and I know that there are specific complications with Biden himself just because of his age and his inability to prosecute these cases, rhetorically speaking. But normally, I mean, you look at the polling numbers for Gallego and Tammy Baldwin and the whole slate of Democratic candidates right now, the American people are with us. And so we don't have to bend over backwards to say, like, okay, we have power, let's give half of it to Republicans. I think that's the wrong move. I think that we should be proud of the agenda that we're running on. I am. I know that we're on the right side of history. There are no Republican positions that I agree with. And so I don't think we should kind of hand over the reins of power to somebody who would enact an agenda that I don't agree with. And I understand why you would think to do it just because of like the concept of unity. But remember that right now we are not, the asymmetry is so great that on one side you have a Republican Party that if it has a shred of power wants to just undermine Democrats' ability to even exist. And so on the left, I guess what I've been begging people to do is to be okay with fighting back, fighting for our agenda, being unapologetic in that fight, and standing behind our values and what we believe in without feeling like we have to defer to any Republicans. And so that's my thoughts on this, which is not to say that some type of unity ticket wouldn't have its merits in terms of like bringing independents and pro-democracy Republicans on board. But my thought in all of this is that we are on the right side of history, that the agenda we espouse is the right agenda, that the arc of history will favor progress and the left, and to not feel like we have to cede what control we do get to a Republican Party that is largely hell-bent on destroying the Democratic Party as it exists today. So I think that's where we stand. I think when we're able to fight effectively, that's when we win. And that's what we should continue to do, just as we've done it in 2018, 2020, 22, 23, and we can do again now. It's just a matter of like getting some clarity in terms of what the top of the ticket is going to look like, and also recognizing that, you know, regardless of what the top of the ticket looks like, this is a choice between two very, very different agendas that both parties are looking to pass. One is consolidating power for the executive branch and basically enacting a theocratic, religious, extremist agenda, a Christo-fascist fever dream. The other is protecting and expanding reproductive rights, gun safety, unions, wages, efforts to combat climate change, making healthcare more affordable, just as they've done for the last few years, all the while expanding jobs and making sure that we have the strongest economy in the entire world. So that's where I stand on that issue. Again, we'll leave it there for those watching right now. Again, if you're not yet subscribed to this channel, please make sure to subscribe. And one last time, if you're looking to support my work, you can look at the pinned comment in the chat and pre-order my new book, Shameless. It is coming out in less than a month, and that is the single best way to support the work that I do. So you can also just search for Shameless at your local bookstore, online, wherever it is. Shameless by Brian Tyler Cohen. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and talk to you probably tomorrow.